The 666 thing is pretty clear to most scholars. It's a way of indicating the numerical value of the enemy's name. The enemy is called a beast, and the beast, like in other books of the Bible, the book of Daniel, other books, Revelation, the beast represents both a kingdom and an individual.
There are so many theories about the book of Revelation, and many think it's predicting the future. But what do scholars say about it? Dr. Bart Ehrman has a book coming out on Revelation, so I wanted to interview him because I worry a lot of the assumptions we have about it might be misguided. So I hope you learned something about Revelation from this interview. Enjoy. I'm really glad to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you here on my channel today. I never thought this was going to happen, so this is wonderful. I really wanted to talk to you today because you've mentioned you have a new book coming out that you're currently still working on, I believe, on Revelation. Is that correct?
It is correct. I'm doing the final edits now. I finished and sent it to my editor who wanted me to change a couple of sentences, and so I'm doing that.
That's awesome. That's what I want to talk about today. But you also have an upcoming debate going on. This is supposed to be something different, though. Can you tell us what's going on with this? And what's different about this debate?
Yeah. So some of your listeners may know Mike Licona. He's a conservative evangelical apologist who wrote a very large book trying to prove that the resurrection of Jesus happened. And our debate is going to be whether Jesus did rise from the dead or not. For me, it's a very interesting topic, in part because I used to be a conservative evangelical myself who went around proving that Jesus was raised from the dead. And now, as a agnostic atheist, I don't think you can prove it at all, even if it did happen, but I don't think it happened. And so this is going to be an unusual debate because usually, they go for an hour and a half or something. This thing's an all-day affair. And we're going to cover so much territory of interest to anybody who's like at all interested in anything with early Christianity or Jesus or the New Testament, the reliability of the Gospels, contradictions, what historians can show happened in the life of Jesus and the death of Jesus. And so a ton of stuff that we're going to disagree on a lot of things. And so we'll see how it comes out.
All right, guys, I just want you to know tickets are being sold for this debate right now, and I'm putting the link up here on the screen. If you go to inspiringphilosophy.org/big-debate, you can get your tickets now. Again, this is a 7-hour debate, and I know some of you have talked to me and complained that when these debates happen, there's not enough time for people to go into them. There's not enough time to really dig deep. Well, this is it. This is going to be the time where two scholars can go head-to-head and go and dive deep into this topic. So again, go to inspiringphilosophy.org/big-debate. Get your tickets now for this debate. Show up, support Dr. Licona, Dr. Bart Ehrman here with me today, and it's going to be wonderful, I promise. So again, link is right there. I've also put it below. And so with that, I also want to talk to you about Revelations in your upcoming book, because that is something that I've always been interested in. For one, I don't really think it's about the future, as a lot of Christians do. So can you talk about a little bit Revelation? First question I have is, wasn't this a book that was added late to the canon? It's something that wasn't included. It was kind of debated between Christians and whatnot. Can you talk about that a little bit and why you think it ended up in the canon?
That's a topic I deal with in the book. I mean, the book started out being a book trying to show why it's not predicting our future and showing why it's not just saying it's not, but it's actually showing why it's not. And talking about how that interpretation has led to a lot of problems over the years and still does. But my last chapter of the book takes up this very question: why did it have such trouble getting into the New Testament, and what happened, and all of that. So there were debates about it. The way it basically worked out was that in one part of the empire, in the western part of the empire, they thought that there were debates about it. In the eastern part, there were debates. So there was a kind of a split about whether it ought to be in or not, along with other books. Like the Apocalypse of Peter. Some people thought the Apocalypse of Peter should be in the New Testament rather than the Apocalypse of John. And Peter lost that debate, and John won it. So there were various reasons for doubting that it should be in the New Testament. One big one was that people didn't think that John, the disciple, wrote it, that it was written by a different John. And they thought that because they could read the Greek. When you read the Greek, whoever wrote the book of Revelation did not write the Gospel of John. I mean, this is the, there was a third century church father who demonstrated it. This
Mm.
is not the same guy, and the proofs that he came up with are ones that people still hold to today. The author of the Book of Revelation did not write Greek very well.
Mm.
There are grammatical mistakes. I mean, just flat out mistakes. So it's not very good in terms of the Greek, which has nothing to do with whether the message is valuable or not. But I'm just saying it's a different guy. So that was one.
Mhm.
The other thing is the thing that was a bigger problem for most people reading the book in the ancient world was that it seemed to celebrate the glories of the life to come here on earth in these very materialistic kind of crass terms, that it's going to be like one big banquet after the other in a city of gold, and it's very materialistic, and it started getting into trouble when many Christians started adopting a very kind of strict lifestyle, where they thought if you're going to be deserving of God, you have to deny yourself in this life. And so you're not supposed to eat well, you're not supposed to drink a lot of wine, you're not supposed to have much sex, you got to preserve yourself for God. And here comes Revelation saying, oh yeah, city of gold, streets of gold, pearl, banquets, it's like, oh my God, this is not what we think it's going to be like. And so that was the main reason. So until about the fifth century or so, it was not widely accepted. Starting in the fifth or late fourth, early fifth century, it started being accepted fairly widely.
Interesting. So why do you think, if you can comment on this or not, why do you think people today try to make this about the future? And what is the cultural context of Revelation really like? So I know that's like a two-part question here. Can you first talk about like why you think people today sort of misunderstood that, even if we're just speculating, but what is the actual cultural context of the book of Revelation?
Yeah, it is two things, but they're closely related, obviously. Today, there's been a tradition of reading Revelation as a prediction of our future only since the end of the 19th century. Um, for most, there were occasionally people who thought it was predicting the future, but they were very occasional. It kicked in big time in the 19th century. It actually started weirdly. This is something else I deal with in my book. It started. People don't know this. It started with the French Revolution. And the reason it started with the French Revolution is you had these Brits who were scared to death, like something like that's going to happen in our country, and it was just chaos in France. And these were people who knew their Bible, and they said, "This is like it says in the Bible. There's all this craziness going on in Revelation. It's a fulfillment of Scripture." And they started thinking that we're near the end now. Um, and that kind of simmered for a while through the end of the 18th century into the 19th century. Then toward the middle and end of the 19th century, this became a dominant reading of Revelation, and it coincided with the rise of Christian fundamentalism. Um, the idea that the Bible is inerrant, there are no mistakes of any kind whatsoever, went closely hand in hand with the idea that Revelation is predicting our future. Most people today, at least in my part of the world, I'm, in the American South, most people, even if they're not Christian, they have a fundamentalist understanding of Christianity, where they think that if you don't believe the Bible's completely inerrant, you can't be a Christian. I mean, fundamentalists think this, but so do the people who are not, because they think that fundamentalists have convinced them that's what it means to be a Christian. That is not what Christianity ever said until the end of the 19th century. And so it's a very bizarre view looked at historically, but it goes hand in hand with that. So I think what happens then is once you're convinced it's talking about the future, just anything that happens, oh my God, that was predicted in Scripture.
Yes.
World War II, Vietnam, and now the invasion of Ukraine. I mean, just anything you say, yep, wars and rumors of wars. There it is. It's predicted right here. And so part of my book is looking at these predictions over the last 100 years or so, showing, they usually don't go well.
Exactly. So what is Revelation in your view? I know that there are many different scholarly views about what this book is doing. What is
Yeah.
what is your view on what is going on here, the cultural context? Just briefly give us your little pitch about what the
Yeah, well,
book's
the
going on
cultural
with you.
context, I think, is pretty clear. This is written sometime near the end of the first century
Mhm.
by somebody who was living in first century Roman Empire. He's actually addressing his book to 7 churches. And what scholars generally think, they disagree, as you say, they disagree on ways to interpret it, but they all, historical scholars all agree that when John, the guy's name was John, whichever John, when John wrote to these 7 churches, he expected them to understand what he was talking about. He was not talking about the 21st century. He was talking about them, and he's writing it for them. And so my view of Revelation has changed radically over the last 3 or 4 years. I used to teach a fairly standard liberal Christian view of this book, which is that it was written in order to provide hope for those who are suffering persecution. And so it was a book of hope. And I have very much changed my view of that. It is a book of hope for those very few Christians in the world who agreed with John. Everyone else is going to be sent to burn in the lake of burning sulfur, everyone who's ever lived. And God's going to destroy this planet, and it's going to inflict horrible misery on the vast majority of the population. So I guess it's a book of hope for people who get through it okay, who have the right beliefs, but for everyone else, it's horrible. And so my book is in part dealing with what D.H. Lawrence called the dark side of Christianity. D.H. Lawrence, the novelist, D.H. Lawrence wrote all those racy novels. His last book was on the book of Revelation, and he did not like it.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait to read it. I'm very interested to see your view, because I try to take more of what you were talking about, your older view. So I'd be very interested to see the perspective and get to see that challenge and whatnot. So let's get into it a little bit more. What is the mark of the beast in your view, and why is it a computer chip on your forehead?
It is not a computer chip on your forehead. I know. There you go. It's like, oh my God, it used to be credit cards. Oh my God, credit card. Now it's like, oh, whatever. So, in Revelation, there are some people who are chosen by God who receive his mark on them, and everybody else gets the mark of God's enemy, the beast. And it's just some kind of tattoo that people get. And if you don't have the tattoo, you're not allowed to buy anything like food. And so Christians are being persecuted. The beast himself, as this might be one of your next questions, but it's 666. Is that one of your questions?
Yeah, let's talk just your view about this, because I know this is as you said, like John knew what he was writing, and he thought the churches would understand. We're still trying to figure that out. So just trying to get some insight.
Some of these mysteries are scholars are pretty sure about, and others they debate about. The 666 thing is pretty clear to most scholars. It's a way of indicating the numerical value of the enemy's name. The enemy is called a beast, and the beast, like in other books of the Bible, the book of Daniel, other books, Revelation, the beast represents both a kingdom and an individual, just as in Daniel chapter 7, it's the same thing. So the beast is both a kingdom and an individual, and it's quite clear who the kingdom is. It's the enemy of the Christians in John's day. That has shed the blood of the Christians, and that is wealthy, and that is exploiting economically the rest of it's Rome. It's the Roman Empire. 666, the angel tells John that that's the number of a man. And so the first emperor to persecute Christians was Nero, who certainly shed Christian blood. And the number of a man means you take the letters of his name and you add them up. In ancient alphabets, in ancient languages like Greek and Hebrew, you didn't have a separate alphabet and a separate numerical system the way we do. We use a Latin or a Roman alphabet, but we use Arabic numerals. They use their own alphabet for their numerals. And so if you spell Caesar Nero, Emperor Nero, spell Caesar Nero in Hebrew letters, the letters add up to 666. So
pretty straightforward. I mean, yeah, that's one thing about the book scholars are pretty sure on, and yet so many laymen today think it's something else entirely.
Yeah, well, Saddam Hussein, it was Gorbachev, and now it's obviously Putin. And it's like, take your pick, whoever's the bad guy at the time. Throughout the Reformation, of course, they said it was the Pope. The Protestants said it's the Pope, and still people say things like that. But you got to put it in some context. And what you do, it's just it lightens it up. You start understanding. Oh my God, that's what that's about. Um,
So then let's talk about the other side, because it talks about the 144,000 at Zion. And, this is like a big thing for Jehovah's Witnesses. They thought they were able to identify that exact number. And people are always trying to identify who these are. What is going on with the numbers here? Because, again, this seems like there's another number issue going on here, 144,000, 12 tribe thing. What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, the people who identify the numbers usually include themselves among the 144. How
Exactly.
do they define it? It's got me in there somewhere. So it's a symbolic number. The book of Revelation is very big in symbolic numbers. I mean, the number 7 is showing up all over the place, for example. 12 is a very important number, not just because of the 12 disciples, but also because of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 patriarchs. And so the 12 is a big number. The 144,000 is specified in Revelation to refer to to 144,000 Jews who are sealed with the seal of God, so that they will survive the onslaught. There's another group that is Gentiles that is not given a number. It's said to be a vast multitude that nobody can count, which was a bit sanguine on John's part, living in the 90s, that there was a vast multitude of Christians and nobody could count, really, maybe 10,000, maybe. But so the 144,000, the idea is that God has chosen the Jewish people, and so a remnant will be saved. 144,000 sounds like a lot. In John's day, there were probably something like 4 million Jews in the world. So it's 144,000 out of 4 million, which is not a lot. But the Bible, throughout the prophets, you always have a remnant of Jews who will be saved, and that's what John's doing, using the symbolic thing. You get 12,000 from 12 tribes, so you get 144,000.
Isn't the tribe of Dan excluded, though?
It's a funny listing, actually, because in the Old Testament itself is a little bit weird this way, because the 12 tribes are named after the 12 sons of Israel. Israel's another name for for Jacob, the patriarch Jacob. And the 12 tribes that settle the land after Joshua conquers the land actually aren't exactly the 12 sons of Jacob. For example, one of his sons is Joseph. There's no tribe of Joseph, but there is a tribe for Ephraim and Manasseh, who are his sons. And Levi doesn't have a tribe because he's in charge of the temple, and so you get but then Revelation gives so you get the 12 sons, which should be the 12 patriarchs. Then you get the 12 tribes, or a bit different, and you get the 12 in Revelation. That's also a bit different. It's really hard to explain where Revelation's getting this one from, because it's not either the 12 sons or the 12 tribes. Go figure.
Yes. So what is the name of the book, and when do you think it's going to come out? I want to give you a chance to plug the book so that people can look for it. I'm excited to read it, because I've always wanted to read more on this and not read books on Revelation where people think it's about the future. I'm sick and tired of that.
Yeah, aren't we all? So I don't know what it's going to be called. This is the time when we start arm wrestling, me and my editor and my publisher. I want to call it Expecting Armageddon. The publisher wants to call it Armageddon, and I will probably go to something else. But I want something about the name of the book of Revelation in the title, because I think that'll be a draw. But about half the time I lose these arguments. After I submit it, this is the weird thing about publishing. It takes about a year for it to show up once it's submitted. So we're shooting for March, a year from now.
Awesome. I am really looking forward to the book. And also, let's just remind people about the debate going on here. You're going to be up debating Mike Licona, which I had him on my channel also recently to talk about it. Again, guys, 7-hour debate. Link below. Get your tickets. Anything else you want to say about the debate to people should know about it?
Did you ask Mike about the book of Revelation?
No. We talked about Mark.
Oh, Mark. Okay. All right. Okay. Look, this is going to be a very interesting debate, because Mike's a smart guy, and he's got the best arguments there are out there. And I think they're completely wrong, and I'm going to show why they're wrong. And so I hope people can come and judge for themselves. I mean, if I have no qualms with somebody believing that Jesus got raised from the dead. It's like, I'm not trying to deconvert anybody or make them think what I do. I just think it's problematic to say that. I've got reasons for thinking that I think are important here, and then people can decide.
Yeah, I think that's great. I look forward to the debate. I think it's going to be wonderful. I've been talking with Dr. Lycone about it as well. So again, thanks for coming on, talking about your upcoming book, the upcoming debate, and I hope to see you again sometime soon. I'll be watching the
Okay.
debate for sure. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.